From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Sometimes it seems like New Bedford can't catch a break. The region's second largest community was left high and dry last month when a developer abandoned plans to build a casino there. But the Whaling City's leader says he sees other reasons for optimism. This week on the first half of Newsmakers, the mayor of New Bedford, Jon Mitchell. Then, it's been a rough week for Cranston Mayor Allan Fung, with a thunderstorm lashing his city's streets and a political storm engulfing his city hall. On the second half of Newsmakers, we examine the political fallout from the Rhode Island State Police's brutal assessment of the Cranston police. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Ted Nisi, filling in this week for Tim White, who is off. Joining me on the panel, our old friend Ian Donis, political reporter at Rhode Island Public Radio. As you heard there, later on we're going to talk about the scandal in Cranston, but first, to his relief, we're going to talk to a mayor whose problems aren't quite as bad, New Bedford Mayor Jon Mitchell. Mayor, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
So I have to start, I'm a reporter, so we always start on a negative note. The casino proposal is dead. Cape Wind is dead. Olympic sailing is not coming to New Bedford. How rough have the last few months felt in New Bedford?
Well, look, we're obviously disappointed. We would have liked each of those projects to come to fruition, because with those projects would have come more jobs, and particularly the casino, which is like any casino anywhere, is a very large employer. But you know, the reality of New Bedford, the narrative of New Bedford over the last 3 or 4 years has been one of growth. Since 2011, New Bedford has grown some 4,000 jobs, according to the Massachusetts Department of Labor. At this time last year, the Wall Street Journal reported that of all U.S. cities, New Bedford had the sharpest drop in unemployment over the previous year. So, you know, there's been a big run-up in the last couple of years. More cargo in the port, the fishing industry is stabilized. As you know, we're the largest commercial fishing port in America. That's doing well. Our manufacturing base is growing. Companies like Joseph Abboud have been adding lots of jobs. In the case of Joseph Abboud, about 300 jobs last year. Lots of new businesses, lots of new permits. The city's bond rating is its highest now in its history. So we're actually on a roll. And these big, shiny projects like casinos and the Olympic sailing event and others garner the headlines for very understandable reasons. But what we're doing in New Bedford is really hitting the singles and doubles of economic development, which will lead to sustainable growth in the long run.
I have to ask you on the casino proposal. I was hearing here in Rhode Island rumors KG Urban didn't have the cash, the developer, to get that project done. Yeah. Did you do your homework on whether they had the sustainable resources to get that done?
Well, we did to the extent that we could. So I had doubts along the way that they could pull financing together, because they didn't have an operator at the table until a few months ago. Foxwoods came into the picture, and then once Foxwoods came into the picture, it lent some credibility to their assertions that they could pull the money together. And so we proceeded with first a host community agreement, which we which we negotiated, I think, with a great deal of strength, and ultimately received a good agreement for the city. And then we proceeded to a referendum that got overwhelming support from the community. Then they pulled the plug, and we were surprised by that, just given their assertions. They asserted to the Gaming Commission that they could pull together financing, and Stephen Crosby, the chairman of the State Gaming Commission, said, you know, at some level we just have to take your word for it. We can't audit your books at this point in the process. That's not the way the process works. So we all relied on the representation and proceeded. But so disappointed, no doubt. But look, we're not flat-footed. The site that would have been the location of the casino is a waterfront site that has lots of potential. It's going to require an awful lot of cleanup, and despite the casino development, we've been doing some pretty intensive waterfront planning over the last several months, including at that site, and those plans are really going to start to come into the public light in the next few months.
Do you hope to resurrect another casino proposal for that site?
Well, so I think Ian, that site may be more difficult than others in the city to build a casino because of the upfront cost of the cleanup. It's been estimated that that site would cost about $50 million to clean up, which is an awful lot for any developer, regardless of the use. There are other sites in New Bedford where we can leave open the possibility of a casino if the Gaming Commission decides not to issue a license in Region C just yet. they only can issue one license, and that might be to the city of Brockton, which has an application now before the commission. But if they don't, if the Gaming Commission doesn't proceed with the issuance of a license, then we might be back in the game. But we're not focused on that entirely.
As you know, Mayor, Twin River here in Rhode Island is proposing a convenience casino for Tiverton that's a proverbial stone's throw from the border with southeastern Massachusetts. Right. This has to be approved by voters in Rhode Island next year and in Tiverton. Are you concerned that that will soak up gambling dollars that might have otherwise gone to a site in southeastern Massachusetts?
Well, it's a fair question for all the obvious reasons. If it's right on Route 24 where it's planned, I mean, it would be an easy stop for folks in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. But the reality is all these things, these decisions are made based on data. The casino developers that we dealt with, and really others all around the country, are very sophisticated business people, and they'll do their so-called gravity models to study the catchment area of all of these markets. And if they can build, they will. What the limited feedback we got about the Tiverton casino is that it wouldn't matter all that much, not enough. The major concern in southeastern Massachusetts has been the possibility of a tribal casino in Taunton, because under the compact with the state, that casino wouldn't be taxed at all by the state if another commercial casino opened up, whereas a commercial casino would be taxed at approximately 21%. So it would be a huge competitive advantage for a tribal casino and really make a commercial casino in the region unviable.
If I recall, you were a little skeptical of casinos further back. Obviously, you ended up getting a deal right. You thought could be good, but is any part of you relieved that KG Urban, it's not going to happen and you can move on from casino development in New Bedford? No,
I believe me, I am disappointed because we did get a good deal out of this. Not all casinos work well in the communities that host them. I think the experience around the country has been mixed. But when they're done right, they can generate other economic activity. And we negotiated an agreement that had certain limitations in terms of the size of the facility, the height of the buildings, the signage, the location, the orientation of the buildings, as well as building and promotional programs that would support our downtown and our waterfront that really together lent themselves to a successful project. And so we felt very confident about it. I took a very skeptical approach up front because I think it was in the city's interest to do that. I basically said, look, KG or any other casino developer, you've got to prove to us that your deal is a good one for New Bedford on balance, and they finally came around to that, and ultimately they pulled the plug because of the financing problems.
You've been mayor a couple of years now. You know the narrative about New Bedford and Fall River.
Right.
They're economically depressed. Their best days were the 19th century, right. Everything else. What is the biggest challenge you see when you sit in the mayor's office that has held back this region from growing more robustly? I know you point to optimistic things, but there
right.
still has to be some frustration that you don't see it where you wish it was.
Right. Well, so let me just speak to the perception and the reality. So perception is a lagging indicator. It takes a while for people to relinquish their perception of a place, good or bad. And the reality for New Bedford is that it has grown an awful lot. I will tell you that invariably when people come to New Bedford, and especially the downtown, and look around, the reaction is, oh, I can't believe New Bedford looks like this. It has physically changed. It'll take a while for the perception to catch up with that, but the data shows that crime is dropping some 13% over the previous year, the first 6 months versus the first 6 months of last year. I mentioned the job growth. School reform is going apace. So in the long run, the perception will catch up. There are a few things that we do need to do, and one of the things that New Bedford lacks is a major higher ed presence. So we're trying to grow that out as much as possible because universities are driving the American economy, and New Bedford is one of the few urban centers, as opposed to satellite centers, urban centers in America that doesn't have a home university. But we've got good programs, UMass programs in our city, and we're trying to build them out so that we retain a professional class in our city and produce commercializable research as well. That's a big thing. And then fully utilizing our waterfront. The Port of New Bedford is the largest commercial fishing port in America. It is a growing cargo port. It is a rapidly growing recreational boating center. And we can do an awful lot more with that. We're not going to be Newport. We're not going to be a fully industrial port. We're going to be primarily an industrial port, but that'll have some really interesting non-industrial elements in the central waterfront. We hope in the long run that'll bring more people into the city.
You referred a bit earlier to how the Wall Street Journal cited New Bedford for having the biggest drop in unemployment among U.S. cities.
Right.
Was that mainly a reflection of how much room for improvement there was, or were there proactive steps that your administration took that helped to foster job growth?
Well, any elected official would say that all the growth is attributable to me, but I can't say that with a straight face. But we'd like to. So it is the work of the hardworking business owners, small and large, in New Bedford that have enabled their companies to compete very well and to grow jobs. We do pride ourselves on creating a fertile business climate. We are very receptive to business. We try to understand the needs of businesses and be flexible in how we accommodate them, of course, within the rules. And so in the reality is, I also think that, just picking up on the point I was making before, I think the perception in New Bedford is starting to catch up. It is starting to be seen as an appealing place. The downtown is appealing for a lot of folks who want an urban lifestyle, an experience that's very similar to lots of other American cities right now. We are recognized as having a very low cost of living compared especially to Boston, but other places in the Northeast.
On a related note, Massachusetts Congressman Joseph Kennedy recently talked about a need for a more regional approach to economic development between southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Sounds good, but as we know, we're very parochial in this part of the universe. Do you see any realistic ways to move forward on that in New Bedford?
Yeah, so I agree with the sentiment. At least that we should be communicating well with our counterparts in Rhode Island. I'm very good friends with Mayor Alorza, and was very good friends with Angel Taveras before him, and we've communicated on many issues over the last few years. And I think that kind of spirit of communication is appropriate and necessary. And if there are major projects, especially infrastructure projects, that we can work on together, we should be promoting them. Our approach to economic development is largely, and this may sound very parochial, but it is city-centric. And New Bedford does see itself as the urban core of our region in southeastern Massachusetts. I mean, we hold ourselves out that way, and I think it's necessary, because we are a real city with a real metropolitan area, and like other metropolitan areas, the urban core has to be solid and developed first as a primary objective, and then to grow out from there.
One of the biggest problems facing New Bedford, like many cities, huge shortfall in your pension system for city retirees. I looked up the numbers. It was nearly $350 million last year, less than half the money needed to pay benefits. Rhode Island, we repeatedly see cities have to ask retirees to take cuts to stabilize this. Is that something you could see New Bedford having to do?
Well, so the authority of cities to make those kinds of cuts is different from Rhode Island. So in Massachusetts, cities have far less authority to undertake those measures. The authority largely lies with the state, and we've pressed the state to reform the way that we do pensions in terms of both eligibility and benefits. And so that's a work in progress. With pensions are less of a problem for New Bedford than retiree health care. So with pensions, we are at least paying the ARC, right, the annual minimum amounts to keep up with future liabilities. Not so with retiree health care. And that's an area where that's growing in expense, and I think at some point Massachusetts, and again, this is an area where the state has almost exclusive control. That's an area where the state is going to have to step in. And it's not unique to New Bedford. It's not unique to the cities in Massachusetts. It's true of communities large and small in the state, and I think reform is due.
We're running short on time, but I have to ask this question. Will you run for re-election?
Well, I wasn't planning on making any news today, Ted, but look, there is a lot. Let's put it this way.
Just so people at home know, August 18th, I believe, is the deadline, right? So you do have to decide pretty soon.
So my wife accuses me of being a procrastinator, and she probably has a point. Look, there's a lot of work to be done, and I took on this job to get things done, not just to occupy an office for a certain period of time. We have lots of goals in the area of developing our port and our downtown and reforming our school system And none of these things are overnight exercises, and my approach has always been about the long run. So that's a long way of saying, stay tuned.
You sound like someone who's leaning toward running.
Well, I'm certainly engaged in the job. We have a strong team, and I'm looking forward to the future. How's that?
Well, it's not what I wanted, but we'll try. Are you worried Scott Lang will be running against you, the former mayor?
Oh, you know, he's one of many people who's been rattling their sabers, and that's just natural in politics. I try not to pay too much attention to that. I think what people want to see is somebody just doing the job. We live in an era where there's so much partisanship and ideological differences, especially in Washington, and things are getting done at the municipal level in America. That's where voters and everyone else look to solve their problems these days, big and small. And so I take that charge very seriously, and so I'm just continuing to put my head down and trying to get things done, and we're succeeding.
Well, Mrs. Mitchell, it sounds to me like he's running, but I'll leave it to you to figure out if that's the case or not. Mayor Mitchell, thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Ted.
And don't go away on Newsmakers, though, because coming up next, the fallout in a different major city in our region, Cranston, the police scandal there, and how it'll affect Allan Fung's future. Joe Fleming, our political analyst, joins us. Stay with us on Newsmakers. Great, thanks, sir. I didn't think I'd get the announcement. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Ted Nesi, filling in this week for Tim White, who is off. Joining me on the panel is Ian Donis, political reporter at Rhode Island Public Radio, and joining us for the second half to break down the politics of what's happening in Cranston, Eyewitness News political analyst Joe Fleming, our old friend. Joe, good to see you in an off year.
Yes, absolutely.
We don't always see each other here. So a lot of you out there have probably already heard a lot of what happened in Cranston, but to get some of you up to speed with what's gone on, of course, the Rhode Island State Police released this very tough, scathing report on the conduct of the Cranston police, very critical of Mayor Allan Fung. Here's an excerpt from what the state police had to say. This report came out Monday. Quote, the state police interviews of Cranston police officers and others revealed a department in turmoil and hampered by a lack of leadership. We found numerous examples of officers who were harassed and retaliated against. We also found inappropriate interference, undue influence, lack of accountability, and inconsistent action from Mayor Fung, Colonel Palumbo, as well as other city officials. As a result of these serious issues within the department, morale was terrible. So this came out last week. Obviously, we were waiting to hear from Mayor Allan Fung on his response. It took about 48 hours, but he sat down with reporters for an hour. Ian and I were there. Here's a quick excerpt of what the mayor had to say.
I want to apologize. Apologize to the residents of Cranston. I recognize I'm not perfect, but the measure of a man is not the mistake he's made in the past, but how he grows from them. And I'm growing, and I will continue to do so. Hindsight is always 20/20. And after reading the report, I wish some things were done differently. I wish I had done a better job of balancing delegation with hands-on action. And yes, I was too trusting of Colonel Palumbo.
Mayor Allan Fung responding to the Rhode Island State Police report, referring, of course, to former Police Chief Marco Palumbo, his appointee. Palumbo said this week he never misled the mayor, so they're in a bit of a war of words themselves. But Ian, as I said, we were in the room together listening to Mayor Fung there. Give people a sense of what was his tone and what was his overall message at this press conference?
Well, whether by accident or design, Ted, this was really politics 101, right? Mistakes were made. The mayor apologized. He said the buck stops with him. And there's so much in this 182-page report that the details might elude a lot of people who want a simple one-sentence explanation of what's going on. That's a double-edged sword. Because there is so much there, there's plenty of ammunition for people who want to criticize the mayor or citizens who just have a legitimate concern in what's going on and what has happened. But the mayor was contrite, apologetic, and we've seen this from a number of Rhode Island politicians in recent years.
And one of the things I found most interesting in the report and in Mayor Fung's comments. This all goes back to Ticketgate, that ticketing scandal after the police union contract was voted down. It turned out the police union leader, Stephen Antonucci, had ordered that. And the report says that Mayor Fung, while publicly calling for Antonucci to be disciplined and perhaps terminated, was actually secretly had promised to get him his job back at his full rank and pay, and there was a private fight about it and everything else. Fung didn't really dispute that happened last year during the election.
No, he didn't. You're absolutely right. He kind of defended his intentions, but it does offer a contrast from the mayor's narrative as an advocate for citizens, and this is one of the central issues in this crisis in the Cranston Police Department. Absolutely.
And what's the mayor's, how would you summarize the mayor's defense of why he was secretly trying to bring Antonucci back when so many people wanted him terminated?
Well, it's complicated. He says he was limited in some ways by litigation, that Antonucci filed 3 lawsuits. There's the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, which is a disciplinary proceeding that in the eye of critics offers a lack of accountability for police who are under scrutiny. And the mayor said he was trying to take action but was limited by what he could do by some of these things.
Joe, Ken Block supporters are kind of tearing their hair out that this is coming out a year after he and Allan Fung were in that tough Republican primary for governor last year. Do you think it would have had an impact if this had been known at the time?
Oh, Tim, I definitely think it would have. Keep in mind, Republican primary is very small turnout. Allan Fung won the primary by about 3,000 votes. All Ken Block would have had to do is switch 1,500 votes. Fung won Cranston by 2,000 votes. If this issue did come out, I really think it would have had a big impact because it would change the image of Allan Fung, somebody who was looking like more inside politics than above board. So I think it would have had an impact. I think the Block results could have been very different in the primary.
And now looking ahead, Allan Fung is actually up for re-election next year in 2016. Right. He's been very popular in the past in Cranston, unopposed in 2012, actually.
You're right, Ted. He's so popular in 2012, the Democrats did not even put up a candidate for mayor of Cranston. So he was unopposed. And polling has showed that Fung's had a lot of Democratic support in the city of Cranston. Well, now I think a lot of that is probably eroded. I think the Democrats are basically looking at this as a race they could win in 2014 if Allan Fung is even the candidate for mayor. He may not run. We don't know that at this point. But I think the Democrats feel they have a legitimate shot to win the seat in Cranston. And I'm sure there's some Republicans already jockeying for a position in case Allan Fung does not run.
And Fung told us he's almost confident he'll run again, but he didn't totally commit to that.
Well, if you're a sitting mayor and you have 17 months left in your term, you basically have to say that. If you say, I'm not running again, you're becoming a lame duck mayor right away. And then the city council, he's going to have even more problems with the city council. He's going to have enough of problems over the next 17 months because they're going to question every single thing he does. But if you say you're not running, you're really in trouble.
And before I go back to Ian, Joe, if you're one of Allan Fung's advisors and you do want to win in 2016, what do you do now?
Well, what I do is what he started to do. You go out there, you apologize to voters, you go to the city council, you answer all the questions, you keep running to this issue, not running away from the issue. Because when you run away from it, it looks like you're hiding. And at the same time, you talk about everything you've done in Cranston that has turned things around. You came in with problems, you solved a lot of the financial problems. The bond rating has gone up in Cranston. You try to stress that. But this one issue could override everything. Look at Hillary Clinton with the emails. It has legs. It keeps following her around. This is the same type of issue that could follow Allan Fung right through the next election.
Ian, Republicans don't have the deepest bench in Rhode Island. Allan Fung, their candidate for governor last year. Some of us definitely thought he might make another run for it in 2018. Do you think this has an impact on that?
Absolutely. If Fung's first fight is re-election. If he does decide to pull the trigger on that, he can't think about anything beyond that right now. He's got to focus on the short term. And this really raises the question about who might be the Republican gubernatorial candidate in our next statewide election in 2018. There are not a lot of obvious names to go to in terms of that.
We're incorrigible, aren't we? We're already talking about 2018 nominees.
we are.
Joe, what do you think on the statewide question?
Well, I agree. I think Allan Fung 2018 probably could have been the candidate, but I think this really derails his campaign in 2018. And as Ian said, there's not a lot of Republicans, but we've had Republicans come out of the woodwork. Don Kucheri, he wasn't a household name when he first ran. So it has happened in the past. I wouldn't count Ken Block out again to taking a look at the race, depending on how Gina does over the next 3 years.
And that's a huge question. How strong
Absolutely.
does Gina Raimondo look in a couple of years from now? Ian, I don't want to blow past in the state police report about Cranston some of the pretty serious allegations about misconduct by the police there, especially ordering surveillance on private citizens, then covering it up. I mean, these are some serious kind of civil liberties issues. What are you hearing this week on that score?
Well, we've heard the Rhode Island chapter of the ACLU say the report, as detailed as it is, focuses mostly on internal issues related to the Cranston Police Department. The ACLU is questioning to what extent these issues might have affected citizens, and they've asked the City Council to look at that. We know the City Council is expected to hold a special meeting this coming week to ask questions of Mayor Fung, so we could hear more about that.
And Joe, the council's role going forward could impact Allan Fung, right?
Oh, there's no question. The council is Democratic 6-3. I would think the Democrats and the council are going to try to keep this issue out there as long as possible. So if the ACLU is asking questions, the council might say, yes, let's investigate these things. They're also going to question everything Allan Fung proposes from now on. Where in the past he might have been able to work with some Democrats to get legislation through, I think he's going to have a lot more difficult time now over the next 17 months trying to get anything through the council that he wants, especially if they start questioning things.
Quick one I didn't prepare either for. Do you think Allan Fung runs for mayor next year?
I am not sure. If this thing has legs, it's going to be very difficult. At the same time, it depends who the Democrats run. You have to have a viable candidate to run if you're going to defeat Allan Fung. He has been very popular. Will people give him a second chance? We don't know that at this point. It's up to the voters of Cranston.
Ian, quickly?
I went into 2 small businesses in Cranston prior to the mayor's news conference. One business owner said she wasn't really following this. The other one was harshly critical of the findings of the state police report. But I suspect that Mayor Fung probably will seek re-election.
All right, we'll find out. We'll be tracking it on Newsmakers. See you back here with Tim White next week.